Love and Dragon Radio. I'm your host, M.L.Ruscsak. I'm here with my fabulous guest, James Hill. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Good. How have you been? You have been on this show before.
Yes, I have. It's been a couple of months now. When I came on the show the last time, I was still working on book 3 of the Killer series, Killer with Black Blood. And I am happy to say I have now published Killer with Black Blood.
Yay! So that came out exactly when?
That means this little guy right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that. There you go. That's better.
Okay.
That little guy right there was published on yours truly birthday. Because I figured I owe the world a present for putting up with me for so long.
Yes.
And so now the Killer series had one more book to go. So this is book number 3. And it's kind of like Nikki's story. If you read book 1 and 2, you know book 1 was Nikki and Morris's story as they got together as teenagers and started moving up in the crime world. Right. And then that would Kill with a Heart. And Kill with 3 Heads was more Morris's story, how he left and came back when they kidnapped his daughter, and more or less how he became his international criminal self. And now we're into book 3, which is kind of like Nikki's story, how he becomes godfather of his mafia family.
Of course, because first you get into the crimes, then you want to get away, then now you're going back into it. And it's back and forth, and it's mobsters, and yeah.
Well, they didn't really want to get away. It's more like they needed a change of scenery, especially Morris, because he becomes a very wanted man, considering all the crimes that they commit.
Of course.
And he's wanted by both the mob and the government and all that kind of stuff. So that's why he that's why he disappeared for a while.
Right, because you double cross the mob, so the mob and everyone's looking for you, and then you're doing crimes to begin with, so the government, police, and FBI and everyone else is looking for you, so you don't want to stay in Dodge.
Yeah. So the safest thing to do is get out of Dodge. So he did, and that was book 2, and then he comes back to, of course, revenge as things happen, and revenge. Of course,
you can't just stay gone. That would defeat the purpose of doing everything you did to become, whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. So now we have book 3, which is Nikki's kind of story and all the double dealings that he done to become godfather, and of course leads to his assassination attempt. And then, of course, his friend Morris has to come back and look for their killer and all that kind of stuff and reap more revenge.
Okay, so you have this terrific mob anthology going on because you're going into book 4 that you're creating. And that's going to be the end, I believe.
Yes.
So
heartfelt. Hard to write end of the series because you start to fall in love with your characters and you don't want to see them go.
I know. Being an author, you don't want to ever end the series because you fall in love with your characters and they become your best friends.
Yes.
Even if they're creating havoc within the world that you're creating.
Yeah, even if they're dark and dangerous people that you probably wouldn't hang out with. Well, that's not quite true. I did hang out with some dark and dangerous people.
Well, we have to have our people that we hang out in real life that we can inspire and create a character based on some of their attributes.
Well, it's the art of knowing when to leave the room. So, it's always, okay, you know what? I'm going to go get a beer. You guys do whatever it is you're going to do. And maybe I'll see you tomorrow, depending upon what happens.
You have to know when to leave the room or hang up the phone or, I'll talk to y'all later. And I really don't want to know about anything else. So just tell me if you had a good meeting or, let me know you're still alive.
Yes.
We say this very lightheartedly because, you know, I'm
So
sure.
we don't want the FBI knocking on our door. That's why.
But at the same time, it makes wonderful stories to tell fictionally.
Oh yes, oh yes. A lot of fiction is written in there. A lot of fiction is written in truth. Like,
Mhm.
you know certain things, but hey, you weren't involved, so it's okay with you, you know. And as long as you're not directly involved,
Mhm.
no one told you about the thing, you read it in the paper, you go, ooh,
Yeah, I
you
know
read a
that
lot of stuff
person.
in the paper. That's where I get some information from too. You
Yeah,
know, sooner or later, some of this stuff does wind up in the news, on the news.
everything negative ends up in the news at some point. It may
They
be 20
say
years from now, but it will become into the news at some point. And then you go back and go, hey, didn't I go to school with, or didn't I used to hang out around such and such?
that was the impetus for writing the Killer series.
Mhm.
It's because you hear about these people years later, and first off, a lot of people who know them now
Mhm.
would be like, "Hey, I never knew he was into that," or "He seems like such a nice guy. Who
Yeah,
knew?"
yeah,
And
it was
this,
like,
yeah,
oh, wasn't he a cardinal in church back years ago? Or, I thought he was such a great person. Or,
yeah,
you know, what didn't he run for some elected position at some point? And then you go back, well, we got to the elected official that, you know, has so much crime going on to get them elected. So,
and to give you an example of that,
Mhm.
when I was growing up in the South Bronx,
Mhm.
my priest from our parish, Father Gigante, he had a brother who was deeply in the mob, and
No.
everybody kind of knew it. And
Mhm.
we definitely knew it when somebody stole the Virgin Mary from the nativity scene in front of the church. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of a dumb crime because it was a life-size statue of the Virgin Mary. And it was like, what are you gonna, whoever stole it, what are they gonna do with that? It's not like there's a real need for that. You're not gonna be able to sell it to anybody other than another church.
Right.
So it's like, what are you gonna, and his brother showed up at church that Sunday. My father was giving the sermon and everything and talking about how bad it was to steal from the church and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And he said, but don't worry, we will get it back. And of course, I was found in the church here, all the Cadillac, black Cadillacs, everybody. And we're
Right.
looking and like, these guys never been to service before. And
Right.
like the next
You know,
week it was returned,
right.
unscratched.
It's like people, when I was growing up, they stole the entire nativity scene from the
Wow.
one church. Not just the Virgin Mary, but the entire nativity scene. I'm like, and it wasn't a church I went to, but you read it in the paper and go, what are people still in the nativity scene at Christmas time for? What are they going to do with it?
Yes, exactly. What are you going to do with it? Especially if they're in front of the church, they're usually life-size statues,
Mhm.
you know? And it's like, well, where are you going to, what would you actually do with that? Why steal it?
Yeah.
And it would rumored that some junkie stole it and was going to try to hawk it or whatever. And,
Yeah.
you know,
It,
but it was returned.
yeah. It's same with this. It was like, was in the newspaper, nativity scene stolen from the church. And I'm like, and that's how I knew about it because again, it wasn't a church I went to, but we drove by it every week or every day going to school. You go by the church and go, what? And then it's in the paper, and then a week later it returns.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I'm watching this show. What is it on? It's on Epics or one of them. It's on one of the channel. It's called The Godfather of Harlem. I don't know if you heard of
I've
it.
heard of it, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of TV.
Yeah. So I wouldn't watch it while I was writing the books because I didn't want to be influenced by
Right.
mob stories that, that I'm as I'm writing.
Right.
I wouldn't watch it then. And it's based on real life characters from like the 50s and 60s. And one of the characters is Gigante, and his brother is in it, Papa Gigante. And I was, watching. I was, hey, I know that guy. He used to be my priest. And yes, he was connected to the mob. His brother was a big time mafia guy. So, they show the brother, Father Gigante, in a very good light. Like he's not actually involved in the mob. It's just his brother, and he knows,
Yeah. You have the good brother and the bad brother.
Yeah. And as they used to say in Italian, this might be, this is what we used to hear, and this is what people used to say. An Italian mother has two sons. One will be a priest, and one will be a mobster. Granted, given, that's just the way it's going to be.
Right. So, it's like some of the stories my grandfather used to say, because he was in the Bronx after World War II, and he lived there for several years. So some of the stories that he used to tell that are in his journals, I'm like, how much of this is truth and how much is fiction and how much do I really not want to know? I will just say it's all fiction, and that's all I wanted to get into it because I don't want to know the truth.
Yeah. And my grandfather used to be a cop in Harlem, and he made it to detective a couple of times because he got busted times.
Of course. I mean, when you say you made things. Detective a couple of times, it means you got busted down for something.
Yeah. So, but he was a great guy. I mean, loved him dearly. Great guy. But, there's some things that my uncle and stuff would tell me about, you'd be like, ooh, really?
Right.
You did that?
Right. Yeah. If you think about it, the mom didn't go away. It just went underground.
Yeah.
So we do have to have that air of caution when we do talk about things because they're still around. They're just not as visible as they were back in maybe the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. Well, I guess like the 70s and 80s. Well, probably, around the 80s when they went through the commission trials.
Mm-hmm.
And they locked up a lot of the old dons and stuff like that. They caught them up on the RICO charges, which actually RICO was around for a long time. Just no one ever decided to use it against them. And so when they started using the RICO laws against them, people in the mob started turning, because then it became an idea was, even if they thought you might thought they were going to kill you. Mm-hmm. And so loyalty broke down. Mm-hmm. And if it's like, if you're going to kill me anyway, whether I did something or not, I might as well talk and make a deal.
Right.
So that kind of like broke the back of the mob. And the same thing was happening in Italy at the same time in the late 70s and 80s. It was fun to watch on TV when they would have an entire courtroom full of defendants. Mm-hmm. Had one guy, he's the prosecutor, one guy, the judge, and everybody else in the courtroom is a defendant.
I know.
Like 100 people in there.
So this is a fun thing. If you go on the History Channel every once in a while, they'll have some of the trials. You can go back and watch them, and you're like, oh, they're witnesses. No, honey, they're not. They're all defendants. You have like 200 defendants in one trial.
Yep. And that's one trial. Everyone in the courtroom is a defendant.
Yeah. And they're all related in some way to each other.
Yep. So things like that. But it makes for good stories.
It does.
People
it makes
love the mob stories.
Right. We have great mob movies, TV, books. We have so many great stories based on what we see and what we read, and some of it is based on real life things that may have happened. But yeah. And
Americans love a good crime story. I mean, whether it's the mob, whether it's gangs, whether it's like Bonnie and Clyde, just individual criminals,
We are drawn to the mob stories or the crime stories. I mean, the more grit that's in there, the more we're drawn to it, because you're like, this could have happened.
Yep. And as they say in the news, If it bleeds, it leads.
Mhm.
People love gore. And of course, this is coming up to the good old gory season here of Halloween and stuff.
No, I mean, we just need the gore, right? It's Halloween season.
Yes. So people just love, and people love that. Well, people love to be scared.
Mhm.
You know, you find that people like a thrill.
Right. We do. I mean, how many times do you go to a haunted house pretty much in the dark and something goes boo? When you come, it's not just the lights and stuff, but it's just the thought of someone's going to jump out at me and you don't know when.
Yeah. And I don't really know why that is, but I guess it's ingrained. I guess it's ingrained in us from
It
centuries
is.
of living on the edge.
It is. It's ingrained in us as Americans, and I don't know why, but the thrill is there. And it's not something you get so much in the UK or these other countries that are as much as we do here in the US. We love this kind of storyline.
Yeah. Because in the UK, like you say, in Europe, where kind of like Halloween started, it wasn't really about the spookiness of it.
Mm-mm.
It was more like honoring the dead, honoring your ancestors and
Right.
things like that. Same thing in Mexico. The Day of the Dead is not really a spooky
It's
type
a
of thing,
celebration of the dead.
right? Of past lives and the people who have lived before. And here in America, we kind of like twisted it around.
A lot. But this is a type of story that works during this season. I mean, it works year round, but right now with the gore and everything that we twisted Halloween into, it is one of the stories that people go to.
Yep. I watched, what did I watch the other day? Something I wouldn't watch. And because it was late at night, like 2:00 in the morning, and wasn't going to sleep.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of it. It's one of these horror movies that I was like, yeah, not watching that. I'm never watching that. And then about 2:00 in the morning, I'm flipping
Put it
channels,
on
and I
because
was
there's
like,
nothing else on at 2:00 in the morning.
yeah, well, it's just started. I might as well watch
Right.
it. Yeah. And of course, it's one of these horror crazy movies, and totally nonsensical witchcraft and all this kind of stuff. And sitting there, okay, how is this person still moving around and doing things after they cut off their own arm?
Yeah.
It's like they would have bled to death within a few minutes.
Yeah.
You get your arm cut off, you're bleeding to death. There's no coming back from that. And yet this person is able to run around and do stuff with just one arm cut off and fight. It's like,
yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
The films are so fantasy based that it has no basis of reality, because you have, oh, this person was shot 20 times, but they're still alive, or they cut off a limb, or whatever it is so fictional that it's not even believable anymore. But
and I love like the crime movies and stuff where you see them shooting with the gun, and this guy is firing. He's killed about 15 people already, 20 people already with one gun, hasn't reloaded, and he's just firing. And he's firing. He's not hitting everybody, so he's firing 3 or 4 shots to get one bullet in somebody.
Yeah.
And yet he killed like 15 guys.
Oh, I was watching a crime show a couple days ago, and I don't watch too much TV. I'm like, okay, I know that firearm that holds 6 shots at max, and I just counted like 20.
Yeah. Even if you have a bigger magazine, like, they hold maybe 20 shots, 18, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and you see the gun they have. They don't have these extended mags and stuff like that have like 30 or 40 shots in them. No, they have a regular magazine. That thing's only carrying about 10, 15 shots, maybe 20.
Right.
Tops.
Right.
And yet this guy is out there shooting for like 10 minutes with one gun.
Yeah, that was like, I was watching this with the firearm, and I know for a fact it only holds 6 shots at max. And that's if you have, it's a type of rifle. And they don't have a magazine on it. They don't have an extended clip or anything else on it. So at max, it holds 6 shots. And they just killed 20 people.
Yeah.
it's so fictional, but at the same time, it makes great TV.
Yeah. I just watched the new James Bond movie, and at least they try to minimize that, which they shoot, throw the gun away, grab the guy's gun that they just killed,
Mhm.
and continue
Yeah.
shooting with somebody else's gun. You
Right.
know, yeah, that makes a little bit more sense than, you know, I run around with my little PF6, whatever the hell that gun was that he carried,
Yeah.
and that thing only had 6 shots, but he killed an army full of people with it.
I know. We have to get into the producers' heads or the directors' heads that you have to make it a little bit believable, just a little bit. And you can
Yep.
still be complete fiction, but make it a little bit believable for the people that actually know that firearms only carry so many shots per,
Yeah.
you know.
That you have a limited number of bullets. I don't care what kind of gun you got, you still only have a limited number of bullets.
Right. You have to reload at some point.
Yeah.
So make it just a little bit believable. I mean, even in books, you know, writing a great crime story, you have to make it believable. You have to let the people's imagination fill in the blanks, but it has to have enough believability to it that you can actually get into it and say, this could actually happen.
Right. And that's what I try to do with my stories. I don't try to go for some fantastic idea where, you know, you have the action, you know,
Mhm.
but you have to have the action. So there has to be believable action. You know, the guy can't be beat to a pulp and just bounce up on his feet. You know, it's like the wrestling. If you ever watched wrestling back in the day, where the guy is getting beat down, and then in the last minute of the round of
Right.
the first match, he bounces up and pins the guy and fights over. He wins, you
Right.
know, because he was supposed to be the winner. You know,
Right.
so I write the stories so that they are believable,
Mhm.
so that they do follow logic and actual physical reality. You know, you're not going to get your arm cut off and run 10 blocks. That's
Right.
not going to happen.
No, it's
You're
not.
not going to take a bullet to the chest and then run away. You know,
Right.
You'll bleed to death before you get very far.
Yeah,
So
30
things
seconds.
like that can't happen. You know?
No, you have to have it enough information to make it believable, enough creativity to make the reader go, oh, this is so suspenseful. You know, you have to build this, and you do it really well with your trilogy so far. So I'm very excited to hear about a fourth book. But it's the way it's wrote or the way we see it on the screen, we have to have that moment of this could happen. Because not that we're going to actually do this in our life, but you have to be in the moment when you're
Right.
reading it or watching it.
Right. And that's what you want to do as a writer. You want to draw your readers into the story. You want them to put themselves into the story. Not
Right.
so much as suspend belief,
Mhm.
but believe this is happening to them.
Right.
And hopefully that's what I'm doing. Hopefully, you know, so
You
far
know,
I
I
got a
have
lot of
actually
good
read at
reviews.
least 2 of your books because the third one I just found out came out, so I haven't read it. But the first 2 I have, and you have this suspense, this drama in there that you can relate to, that it could be real, and you draw the reader in.
Yes.
And I'm sure the next 2 books, the one that was just released and the one that's getting ready to be released sometime in the future, we'll continue that.
Well, that's a good way to put it. You know, it will be released next year. Okay, since we're almost at the end of this year, that could be a true statement. I could swear to that. It will be released next year.
Okay.
And hopefully not too far into next year. I try to bring them out at least by the summer. You know, the spring, summer, to get to that summer reading audience when people are on vacation. And because in book industry, there are certain types of books that play better or read better at certain time. You know,
Right.
fall, you want the romance, you want sometimes the horror, but you want, you know, the romance, you want the love story, you want, you know, some of these things. In the spring and summer, people are looking for action, they're looking for fantasies, they're looking for, you know, these type of stories because they're going on vacation or they're outside. It's more energetic type
Right.
reading.
Right.
So Yeah, you're not sitting at home by the crackling fire.
Exactly. There's times that a book does really well, and the times that the book just sits on the shelf. And there are seasons for reading, and people
Yes.
don't understand this. If you think about it, though, unless you're just into crime novels or just into fantasy novels, those are types of novels that people are drawn to during certain points of the year.
Yes.
Unless you're one of these avid readers that go, I only read. And that's great. We love those readers too.
Yes, we do. And I just came back from Nashville, where I went to Killer Nashville, which came up in like August. Yeah, I think it was August. But the book had just came out. And I did some speaking engagements. I was on some panels. So I was speaking about publishing, book covers, and what was the third one I spoke about? Book covers was the third. Anyway, I spoke about three different on three different panels. You know, when you do some of these conferences and stuff like that, you get so much stuff in the meantime and put in there that you can't always remember everything that you spoke about. Oh, that's what it was: scheduling and pacing in the story.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an author doesn't just write. We do panels. We do speaking engagements. We do so much stuff that is not just writing. So when our books come out, if there's a year between the books, don't get mad at us, because during the year we're writing, but we're also doing these other 50 things.
Yeah. And for me, I'm also a publisher. So I'm also reading and publishing other people's books.
I know.
And just like I said before, I don't watch or read stuff that I'm writing about. You know, when I'm publishing my other authors stuff, and I got like 10 authors now and getting ready to go to 11, 12, and probably 13 authors, you know, I don't write my own stuff and I don't work on my own stuff when I'm working on other people.
Right. You can't.
Right.
You get biased on what you're writing versus what they're trying to say within their story.
Right.
Because as a publisher myself, I understand you have 20,000 different things you have to do per author.
Yes, absolutely. So last year was a great year for us because Rockville Publishing published 5 authors thanks to COVID, since we were kind of like stuck inside anyway. And I was able to work with my editor very closely. She finally went back home. She went back home to South Africa. She came here. We were doing a publishing at sea, a cruise, you know, 2-week cruise where we was doing some other work and stuff like that. And she got off the boat. We got off that boat in February of 2019, and COVID hit and everything shut down. And she was stuck here for like a year. So,
but she got to soak in all the culture for the year.
Oh yeah. She then realized why America is so crazy, because she used to ask me, well, why would they do this? Well, why would they do that? And you know, she got to sit there and watch and listen. And she still asked, why would they do that? But then she got to see, you know, all the crazy and things. I would just keep telling them, because that's America, honey.
Yeah, I have a friend that's getting ready, was supposed to come over last year from South Africa. And he's been trying to get here for the last year to go to school. And it's like, well, COVID hit because we were supposed to be here last February. Well, February and March, and school was starting in April. Well, school got shut down. Everything got shut down. So he's like, I can't come to school. Well, now my school visa is no good because I didn't enroll properly. It's like everything got snowballed, but it's like there has to be a better way.
Yep.
But I'm like, oh, you're gonna get here and have a complete culture shock, because what you think should happen isn't what happens. But that's America.
Yep. That's all you can say. Well, that's America.
Yep. You know, just shake your head and go with it.
Crazy as it is.
Yep. I mean, if you look for the last 50 years, how we progress, but at the same time, there's things that need to be fixed. And right now with COVID, thankfully, they have online schools and stuff like this now. So you can do it that way, but it's so shake your head and just go with it. But it was so great having you on the show today. So where can our viewers and listeners find you and your books?
All right, the first place is rockhillpublishing.com. That's the website for the publishing company. You can find all of my books there. You can also find other books that I published there by my other authors. So, romance, sci-fi. I also write sci-fi and I write fantasy. So there's a couple of books up there by yours truly. Always on Amazon. And any place else that they want to look for books, they're out there. Print, hardcover, paperback, ebooks.
Well, there, see,
Look me
you're everywhere.
Look me up on Facebook. Very easy to find me. J.L. Hill, Rock Hill Publishing, either one of those. I'm out there.
Such a great conversation. I always love having authors back on the show, because then we can keep up with what are the characters doing.
Yes, that's why I say, hey, the third book is out now. Let me come back and talk to you about that. I know the last time I talked to you, I was in the midst of writing and editing that book.
I know. I remember it was like, I love the crime story. So yeah.
And you're a great person to talk to.
Well, thank you. I try to be, and I do actually, the books I have on the show, I do at least try to read. I can't read everyone because obviously I don't have the time. No one does, but I do try to read. So
well, thank you for reading mine.
You're welcome. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
And for all of our listeners and our viewers, happy reading.